The first thing Madeline Pierce learned that night was that water does not care what a car cost. 3 hours before the river crossed Riverbend Road, before the white Porsche went silent in the dark with floodwater knocking against both doors, she stood beneath the heated glass canopy of the Ashford Charity Gala and laughed at Ethan Walker's truck. It was a 1994 Ford F-350, silver once, though time had rubbed most of the shine out of it, with a dent over the rear wheel, mud dried along the running boards, and a faded black number painted on the driver's door that almost disappeared unless the light hit it right. R-17. No one at the gala knew what that meant. To them, it was just an old diesel truck sitting at the edge of a parking lot full of polished German sedans, black SUVs, and Madeline's new white Porsche Taycan Turbo S, parked under its own pool of clean electric light like it had been placed there for a magazine cover. Ethan had not parked near the entrance to be seen. He had parked near the service gate because the backup generator was there, and the event coordinator had called him at 4:15 that afternoon after 2 contractors failed to keep the kitchen power from flickering. He came in a gray work shirt, boots with river mud in the seams, and a canvas tool bag that had belonged to his father. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, came with him because the sitter cancelled and because Ethan Walker had learned years ago that life did not stop making demands just because a man was tired. Lily wore a yellow raincoat even though the rain had not started yet. She held a small red toy truck in one hand and stayed close to her father's leg while he lifted the generator panel and listened to the machine the way some people listen to a confession. Madeline noticed the truck before she noticed him. She was crossing the drive with Brent Calloway, her operations director, and 2 donors from Dallas when Brent tilted his chin toward the old Ford and said something about the county museum losing an exhibit. Madeline stopped just long enough to look. She was tall, composed, wrapped in a black coat that looked untouched by weather, and the kind of woman who had trained entire rooms to wait for her opinion before deciding what was funny. "If that thing leaks oil on my pavement," she said, clear enough for the valet line to hear, "send him the cleaning bill." The laughter came quickly because powerful people rarely have to wait for it. Lily heard it. Ethan heard it too. He did not turn around. He only reached down, zipped Lily's raincoat to her chin, and said softly, "Stay by the toolbox, sweetheart." Madeline smiled once more, already forgetting him. By midnight, with her Porsche dead in rising water and her phone showing no service, the only headlight still moving toward her would belong to the truck she had laughed at. Ethan Walker had a way of disappearing into work that made people mistake him for simple. He did not fill a room with stories, did not wear his history on his sleeve, did not correct strangers when they looked at his truck and saw only age. Most mornings, long before the town of Ashford opened its coffee shops and school buses began rolling past the wet lawns, Ethan was awake at 5:15 in the small rented house on Miller Bend Road, where the floorboards creaked near the kitchen sink and the river could be heard after heavy rain if the windows were open. He made oatmeal for Lily, packed her lunch in a pink plastic box with one latch that did not close unless pressed twice, and checked the weather before he checked his phone. Rain mattered to him in a way it did not matter to most people. Most people saw a forecast. Ethan saw slopes, ditches, culverts, low crossings, old bridges, and the soft places where road shoulders gave up first. He had learned that kind of seeing years before, when he worked seasonal recovery support for the county emergency crew, maintaining diesel engines, repairing rescue winches, and driving equipment through weather that made new machines look uncertain. He never talked about those years at the garage. He never mentioned how many nights he had spent listening to dispatch calls through a wall of rain. He never explained the faded number on the truck door. R-17 had belonged to the county once, back when the truck was painted brighter and carried flares, blankets, chains, and a portable pump behind the seat. Ethan bought it at auction after the county retired it, not because it was pretty, and not because it was cheap, but because he trusted it. Machines earned trust slowly. People did too. Lily was too young to remember much of her mother except in pieces, the smell of lavender hand soap, the song Claire hummed while folding towels, and the yellow raincoat she had worn on storm nights when she worked as an emergency dispatcher. The coat hung by the back door now, too small for Claire and too large for memory, but Lily wore it whenever dark clouds gathered because Ethan never had the heart to tell her not to. Claire had died 3 years earlier on a rain-slicked county road after a late shift, in an accident that left no villain, no clean lesson, and nothing for Ethan to do afterward except raise their daughter and keep moving. Grief had not made him loud. It had made him careful. Careful with money, careful with promises, careful with the way he spoke when Lily was listening. That afternoon, before he drove to the gala, he checked the truck the way another man might check a pulse. Oil level. Battery terminals. Tire pressure. Winch line. Tow straps. Spare fuses. Lily stood on the porch with her toy truck tucked under one arm and asked why he never sold the old Ford when people were always saying it looked tired. Ethan closed the hood, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked toward the gray line of clouds beyond the sycamores. Because it knows the river, he said. Then he opened the passenger door and helped her climb in. Madeline Pierce had built her life around things that answered when commanded. Doors opened before she touched them. Engines woke with a button. Assistants moved before she repeated herself. By 39, she had turned Pierce Meridian Motors from a respected regional dealership network into a luxury mobility brand with glass showrooms in 4 states, a private investor list in New York, and a waiting room where people spoke softly because the furniture looked too expensive for ordinary voices. She was not careless. That was what made her difficult to dismiss. Madeline read contracts line by line, remembered numbers without looking down, and could recognize weakness in a proposal before the person presenting it reached the 3rd slide. She believed in precision, clean design, electric powertrains, sensors, diagnostics, and systems that made old habits unnecessary. To her, progress meant removing uncertainty. It meant replacing oil stains with software updates, guesswork with data, and men like Ethan Walker with certified providers who arrived in branded vans and sent invoices through proper channels. That was why Riverbend Road mattered. Pierce Meridian had invested heavily in the new Riverside showroom planned for the south end of Ashford, a sleek 40,000-square-foot building with charging stations, polished concrete, and floor-to-ceiling windows facing the water. The road leading to it had been widened, resurfaced, and photographed for investor materials while orange cones were still stacked along the shoulder. Madeline called it access infrastructure. The county called it an improvement project. Sheriff Owen Rusk had called it a problem 3 times in writing. The low section near the old Sycamore Bend had flooded for as long as local people could remember, not every year, not every storm, but often enough that farmers, school bus drivers, and volunteer fire crews knew to avoid it when rain came hard from the west. The new drainage work was supposed to fix that. It looked convincing on paper. It looked even better in the renderings Brent Calloway brought to Madeline during morning briefings, all smooth arrows and blue flow lines carrying water safely away from the pavement. Brent was good at making uncertainty look handled. He had the polished confidence of a man who understood which facts slowed decisions and which facts helped them move. 2 weeks before the gala, a county engineer had sent a final note warning that the culvert grading still needed review before any public traffic should be encouraged along Riverbend during heavy rain. Brent had marked the email for follow-up and then buried it under launch schedules, donor lists, and a showroom deadline he knew Madeline did not want moved. Madeline never saw the warning. That did not make her innocent. It made her protected by the kind of silence money often buys without asking. On the evening of the gala, she stepped from her Porsche under the canopy with rain clouds gathering beyond the river and believed every important risk had already been measured. Across the lot, Ethan's old Ford sat with its faded number on the door, carrying a different kind of knowledge, the kind that did not fit in a presentation. The generator failure was small enough that most guests never noticed it, which was exactly why Ethan respected it. Small failures had a way of becoming large ones after people stopped paying attention. He knelt beside the service panel behind the glass tent while music moved softly through hidden speakers and servers carried trays of food across temporary flooring that had been laid over the damp grass as if elegance could make the ground forget what it was. Lily sat on an equipment case 6 feet away, her yellow raincoat bright under the service lights, moving the red toy truck back and forth along the edge of the case with one finger. Ethan worked without hurry. He found a loose ground connection, corrosion around a relay, and a fuel line clamp that had been tightened by someone who cared more about finishing than about returning. He fixed the connection first, cleaned the relay, then marked the clamp with a strip of blue tape so the rental company would see it in the morning. That was when Brent Calloway came around the side of the tent with 2 volunteers and a young woman holding a tablet. He looked at Ethan, then at the truck beyond the service gate, and his expression warmed with the easy pleasure of finding something to use. "Is that yours?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. Ethan closed the panel and stood. "Yes, sir." Brent smiled toward the volunteers, not toward Ethan. "We have donors arriving in 6-figure cars, and the first thing they see near the service entrance is a 30-year-old farm truck with half the county stuck to the tires." One of the volunteers gave a quiet laugh. The young woman with the tablet looked down quickly, pretending to read. Ethan picked up his rag and wiped his hands. "I can move it farther back after I test the load." Brent tilted his head. "Farther back would be good. Another town would be better." The laugh that followed was softer this time, but Lily heard it. Her toy truck stopped moving. Ethan saw that without looking directly at her. Madeline arrived a moment later, drawn by Brent's voice and the small circle that had formed. Rain had begun as a fine mist, dotting the shoulders of her black coat. She did not ask what had happened with the generator. Her eyes went to the old Ford, then to Ethan's boots, then to Lily's raincoat. "This is the contractor," she asked. Brent said, "Temporary emergency hire." Very authentic, apparently. Madeline gave the truck another look and let out a brief laugh, not loud, but clean enough to cut. "Well, do make sure it does not end up in any of the event photos." Lily's face changed in a way only Ethan noticed, because fathers notice the quiet injuries first. She leaned closer and whispered, "Dad, is our truck bad?" Ethan folded the rag once, then again. He did not look at Madeline. He did not correct Brent. He did not make the room pay for what it had done. He only crouched beside Lily and said, "No, sweetheart. It is old. That is different." Behind them, a familiar voice came from the rain. Sheriff Owen Rusk had stepped through the service gate, his hat dark with water, his eyes fixed on the faded number on the Ford's door. He did not smile. "Rescue 17, he said quietly. Ethan looked up for half a second. Brent missed it. Madeline missed it too. But Sheriff Rusk did not. By 7:40 that evening, the rain had stopped behaving like weather and started behaving like an accusation. It came hard against the glass canopy, ran in silver sheets down the tent walls, and gathered along the seams of the temporary flooring until servers had to step around shallow puddles while pretending not to notice them. The music continued. The donors continued. People in tailored jackets and expensive shoes stood beneath soft lighting and spoke about community resilience while the river behind the property rose inch by inch in the dark. Ethan heard it before most of them understood it. Not the river itself, but the change around it. Water moving through places that had been dry an hour earlier. Gravel shifting near the service drive. The generator taking on a heavier rhythm as moisture worked into connections it should never have reached. He stood under the service awning with Lily beside him and watched runoff slide across the parking lot toward the storm drains. The water was not disappearing fast enough. Sheriff Owen Rusk saw it too. He came back through the side entrance with his radio clipped high on his shoulder and rainwater dripping from the brim of his hat. His face carried the expression of a man listening to bad news arrive from several directions at once. "Riverbend is taking water," he told one of the deputies near the gate. "Close the low section and get cones at the north turn." Ethan looked up. Owen noticed, but neither man said anything for a moment. Some warnings did not need translation. Inside the gala, Madeline was preparing to leave. The dinner speeches had run long, the lights had flickered twice, and an investor call from California had been moved earlier than expected. She stood near the valet station while Brent Calloway held an umbrella over both of them and scrolled through his phone with the tight focus of someone trying to make inconvenience look temporary. Main Street is backed up, Brent said. Accident near the bridge. Riverbend will cut 12 minutes off. Sheriff Rusk, who had stepped close enough to hear him, said, "Do not take Riverbend tonight." Madeline turned toward him. The new drainage was completed last month. The pavement was completed, Owen said. The drainage still needs review. Brent gave a small laugh, the kind meant to soften disagreement without surrendering it. Sheriff, with respect, it is a Porsche, not a canoe. We are talking about a little standing water. Owen did not look at Brent. He looked at Madeline. I am telling you not to use that road. Madeline hesitated only long enough to make it seem like she had considered him. Then she accepted her keys from the valet. The Porsche unlocked with a soft electric chirp, clean and confident beneath the rain. Ethan watched from beside the service gate, one hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder. He could have said something. He almost did. But men like Brent had a way of turning warnings from people like Ethan into another joke, and Madeline had already decided which voices sounded official to her. The white Porsche rolled out from under the canopy at 7:58, its taillights glowing red through the rain. 10 minutes later, on the low bend where Riverbend Road dipped toward the sycamores, Madeline saw water crossing the pavement in a smooth dark sheet. It looked shallow. That was the first lie Floodwater told her. The second came when the Porsche entered it without resistance. For 12 feet, everything seemed fine. Then the front wheels dropped into the washed-out edge of the lane, the dashboard lit with warnings, and the car stopped as if the road had reached up and taken hold of it. Water pressed against the doors. A branch turned slowly past the windshield. Madeline touched the start button once, then again. Nothing answered. Her phone showed one bar, then no service. For the first time all evening, there was no assistant, no valet, no clean system waiting to respond. There was only rain, rising water, and the sound of the river moving where the road was supposed to be. At 8:12, Sheriff Owen Rusk heard Madeline Pierce's voice break through the radio in pieces, not from her phone, but from a county roadside emergency box near the Riverbend turnout that had somehow held power long enough for one frightened sentence to get through. White Porsche. Low bend. Water rising. Then static took the rest. Inside the gala, the mood changed before anyone announced why. It began with the sheriff moving faster than he had moved all evening, then two deputies pulling on rain jackets, then Brent Calloway stepping away from a donor mid-sentence with his face drained of its easy confidence. People noticed when confidence left a man like Brent. It made a louder sound than panic. He kept saying the same thing into his phone, that service was bad, that she must have pulled over, that the vehicle had emergency systems, that this was being handled. None of those words moved the water. Owen stood beneath the service awning with a county map spread across the hood of a patrol car, rain striking the paper hard enough to blur the ink. Tow truck cannot reach that bend from the south, one deputy said. Road shoulder is gone near the culvert. Another voice came over the radio reporting 6 inches of fast water at the north turn and more coming down from the ridge. Owen looked toward the old Ford parked by the service gate. Ethan had already heard enough. He was standing still, not because he was uncertain, but because he was measuring. Riverbend Road, north approach, Sycamore Bend, washed edge, electric vehicle, dead weight, water moving east across the pavement. Lily stood beside him with both hands wrapped around her red toy truck. She was watching her father's face, not the deputy's, because she knew that was where the truth usually appeared first. Brent followed Owen's gaze and understood it half a second too late. No, he said. Absolutely not. That truck will stall before it reaches the first bend. Ethan did not answer. Owen did. That truck has done it before. Brent turned on him. With respect, Sheriff, this is not a farm ditch. That is a $90,000 vehicle in moving water. It is a person in moving water, Owen said. The sentence settled under the awning and stayed there. Ethan crouched in front of Lily. Rain tapped against the hood of her yellow coat. He took the toy truck from her small hands only after she offered it. "You stay with Mrs. Alvarez in the medical tent," he said. "You do what she tells you." Lily swallowed hard. "Are you going to bring the lady back?" Ethan looked toward the road where the darkness had thickened with rain. "I am going to try." She nodded the way children nod when they are trying to be older than they are. Ethan placed the toy truck in the cup holder of the Ford, where the dashboard light made it look briefly brighter than everything around it. Then he moved with quiet order. Tow straps from behind the seat. Winch controller from the glove box. Heavy gloves. 2 shackles. Flashlight. Bolt cutters. He checked the battery isolator, locked the hubs, and reached under the dash for a weathered radio switch that still had the county rescue frequency taped beneath it in Claire's handwriting. The speaker cracked once, then came alive with voices from a life he had tried to leave behind. Brent watched him, suddenly smaller without an audience willing to laugh. "You cannot be serious," he said. Ethan closed the door, started the diesel, and let it idle low and steady. He did not drive fast when he pulled away. Men who understand floodwater never do. The Ford rolled into the rain with its amber lights turning against the dark, and for the first time that night, every person under the gala canopy watched the old truck instead of the Porsche. Ethan reached the north turn at 8:19 and stopped before the water. He did not trust headlights alone. Headlights made floodwater look flat, and flat water was the oldest lie on a country road. He lowered the driver's window 2 inches and listened. Rain hit the roof. The diesel idled. Somewhere ahead, water moved across asphalt with the steady, heavy sound of something larger than it looked. He leaned forward and studied the road through the windshield, not where the white line should have been, but where the floating leaves moved, where the foam gathered, where the current bent around the mailbox posts and disappeared into the low ditch on the east side. The road was still there under the water, but the shoulder was not. That mattered. A deputy's voice came through the radio asking for his position. Ethan pressed the button once. North approach. Holding at the first crossing. I have visual on the bend. He did not mention that he could also see the faint red pulse of Madeline's hazard lights through the rain, half hidden by the sycamores. The Porsche sat lower than it should have, angled toward the ditch, water curling around the front wheels and breaking against the doors in uneven waves. Inside the car, Madeline saw the amber lights before she understood what they were. For one confused second, she thought another official vehicle had arrived. Then the truck rolled closer, slow and deliberate, its old hood rising through the rain, its faded door number catching a flash of lightning far away over the ridge. R-17. She knew then. It was him. The man from the service gate. The man with the quiet daughter. The man whose truck she had not wanted in photographs. Ethan did not drive straight toward her. He backed the Ford onto the higher gravel apron near the old sycamore, nose pointed slightly upstream, tires biting into the mud with a low grind. He stepped out into water that reached past his boots and moved around his legs with enough force to make a careless man hurry. Ethan did not hurry. He clipped the winch controller to his belt, pulled on his gloves, and took the main cable in both hands. The cable had a red-painted section near the hook, worn and chipped, the mark Claire had made years ago so he could see the safe working length in bad weather. His eyes rested on it for less than a second. Then he moved. Madeline tried to lower her window. It dropped an inch, then stopped. Water pressed against the lower edge of the door. "Do not open anything," Ethan called, his voice calm enough to cut through the rain. "Hands visible. Stay still." She nodded before realizing he could barely see her. He reached the Porsche from the upstream side, keeping one hand on the hood line for balance, and found the front tow point beneath the water by touch. It took longer than it would have in daylight. The current kept pushing branches against his legs. Mud shifted under his boots. Once, the cable slipped from his glove and slapped into the water, but he caught it again without changing expression. From the road above, 2 deputies and Sheriff Rusk watched through sheets of rain, unable to move closer without risking another stranded vehicle. At the gala, people had gathered under the canopy around a deputy's radio, listening to clipped updates as if the sound itself could show them the road. Lily stood beside Mrs. Alvarez, both hands tucked inside her sleeves, eyes fixed on the darkness where her father had disappeared. Brent said nothing now. There was no useful joke left in him. Ethan secured the hook, walked back along the cable, and climbed into the truck. He did not pull hard at first. He let the line tighten. The Ford settled into its suspension. The winch motor began its steady mechanical whine beneath the deeper sound of the diesel. 6 inches. The Porsche shifted. Madeline felt it before she saw it, a small release under the floor, the car turning away from the ditch by a fraction. Ethan eased off, adjusted the wheel, and pulled again, this time using the truck's weight with the winch instead of against it. The cable drew tight as a drawn breath. The Porsche moved another foot. Then 2. Water broke differently around the front bumper. Sheriff Rusk lifted his radio. "She is moving," he said. Under the canopy, no one spoke. In the Porsche, Madeline pressed both hands flat against her lap and watched the old truck through the windshield. It did not shine. It did not look graceful. It shook, strained, held, and kept working. Inch by inch, the road gave her back. The last 10 feet took the longest. Ethan knew that was how water worked. It let a machine believe the hard part was over, then caught the tires at the edge, filled the ruts, and tried to pull everything sideways one final time. He kept the Ford in low gear, left foot steady, right hand on the wheel, eyes moving between the cable, the current, and the pale shape of the Porsche emerging from the bend. The winch motor held its steady whine. The diesel answered beneath it with a low, patient sound that seemed older than the storm. Madeline felt the car rise as the front wheels found the road again. It was not dramatic. There was no clean sudden rescue, no perfect motion, only the slow return of weight to pavement, inch after inch, until the water stopped hitting the doors and began sliding beneath the frame instead. Sheriff Owen Rusk moved first. He stepped into the edge of the floodlight with one deputy at his shoulder and signaled Ethan to hold. Ethan eased off the throttle, set the brake, and let the cable slacken by a few inches. For 3 seconds, nothing happened except rain. Then the Porsche settled on solid ground. Madeline sat inside it without moving. Her hands were still on her lap, fingers pressed together, coat darkened at the cuffs, face pale in the dashboard glow. The systems were dead. The screens were black. All the things she trusted to speak for her had gone silent. Ethan stepped back into the water, unclipped the hook, and came to her door only after checking the level around the frame. He did not yank it open. He did not tell her what she had done wrong. He tested the seal, waited for the pressure to balance, then pulled once. The door opened with a wet, heavy sound. Cold air and rain moved in. Madeline looked at him as if she needed a moment to place him in the same world as the man she had laughed at under the canopy. "Can you step out?" he asked. His voice carried no anger. That made it worse. She nodded. One of her shoes was missing. She seemed to notice that only after her foot touched the road. Ethan offered his arm, not grandly, not tenderly, simply because the pavement was slick and she was shaking. She took it. By the time the convoy returned to the gala grounds, most of the guests were standing beneath the glass canopy or along the service entrance, drawn into the rain by the kind of fear that strips status away. The Ford came first, amber lights turning slowly, mud up to the doors, the red toy truck still in the cup holder. Behind it, the Porsche rolled on a tow line, no longer a centerpiece, just a wet machine that had needed help. No one laughed. Brent stood near the valet station with his mouth slightly open and nothing prepared behind it. Lily broke from Mrs. Alvarez only when Ethan shut off the truck. She ran to him, stopped just before touching his soaked shirt, and looked up to make sure he was real. Ethan placed a hand on her hood and nodded once. Madeline saw that. She saw the yellow raincoat, the toy truck, the mud, the faded number on the door. Sheriff Rusk stepped beside her, rain dripping from his hat, and spoke quietly enough that people leaned in to hear. That truck was Rescue 17. 2009 flood season, it pulled 6 families out when the county rigs could not reach them. The words moved through the canopy slower than gossip and heavier than applause. Madeline looked from the sheriff to Ethan. Ethan was already coiling the wet cable, not looking for praise, not waiting for her face to change. Owen continued, he kept it running after the county retired it. Most folks forgot what it was. Madeline did not answer. Her eyes went to the side of the Ford where the old number sat under rain and mud. She understood then that she had not mocked a broken thing. She had mocked a history of people being brought home. Lily stood beside the truck, small and silent, watching the woman who had made her feel ashamed hours earlier. There was no anger in the child's face. That was what made Madeline look down first. By morning, the rain had moved east and left Ashford looking like a town that had been handled roughly and set back down. Mud marked the curbs. Leaves clung to storm drains. The river sat high and brown under a pale sky, carrying branches past the bridge with a slow, exhausted force. Ethan was awake before sunrise, not because he had slept well, but because men like him did not wait for the day to organize itself. He made Lily toast, checked her backpack, and stood at the kitchen sink while she told him the toy truck needed a bath because it had been on a rescue mission. He smiled faintly at that, the kind of smile that appeared and disappeared before most people could prove it had been there. Outside, the Ford sat in the driveway with mud dried along the doors and water still dripping from the winch cable. He had not washed it. Some things needed to be cleaned. Some things needed to be left long enough for people to understand what they were looking at. By 8:30, the first video had already traveled through town. Someone from the gala had filmed the old Ford coming back through the rain with the Porsche behind it. By noon, local news had the story. By 2, the questions had changed. People were no longer only asking how a 30-year-old truck had reached Riverbend Road when newer vehicles could not. They were asking why Riverbend Road had been open at all, why the drainage review had not been finished, and why Sheriff Rusk's warnings had never reached the public meeting where Pierce Meridian's showroom access plan was approved. Madeline Pierce watched the coverage from her office without speaking. Her Porsche sat miles away in a service bay with river silt under the floor mats and water marks along the doors. Brent Calloway stood near her desk with a folder in his hands and the expression of a man prepared to survive by arranging words carefully. Madeline let him talk for almost a full minute. Then she placed 3 printed emails on the glass desk between them. The county warning. The engineer's note. The message Brent had marked for follow-up and buried. The room went quiet in the way expensive rooms do when the person with power stops protecting someone. Brent said it had been a judgment call. Madeline looked at him for a long moment and said that judgment was exactly what he had lacked. By the end of the day, he was placed on administrative leave, the showroom opening was suspended, and Pierce Meridian announced a full independent review of the Riverbend project. None of that repaired what had happened under the canopy. Madeline knew that, which was why she drove herself to Ethan's garage the next afternoon in a borrowed sedan, with no assistant, no photographer, and no statement prepared by public relations. Ethan was replacing a corroded alternator on a delivery van when she arrived. Lily sat at the workbench coloring a picture of a red truck beside a blue river. Madeline stopped a few feet from the open bay door. For once, she looked unsure of where she belonged. Ethan wiped his hands and waited. Madeline did not begin with business. She looked at Lily first. "I embarrassed you the other night," she said. "I was wrong to do that." Lily studied her for a moment, then looked at her father. Ethan said nothing. The choice belonged to the child. Lily nodded once, small but real. Madeline turned to Ethan. I am sorry, she said. For what I said. For what I ignored. For needing proof that something old could still matter. Ethan folded the rag in his hand. Old does not mean useful, he said. But useful things usually get old. She offered to buy the truck then, not as a joke, not as charity, but for more money than Ethan had seen written on one line in years. He refused before she finished the number. The Ford was not for sale. What he accepted instead came 3 weeks later, after the review began and the county approved a new emergency vehicle restoration program funded by Pierce Meridian. Ethan would lead the repairs. Sheriff Rusk would oversee the training. The first safety course would carry Claire Walker's name. On the morning they repainted the faded letters on the Ford's door, Lily stood beside Ethan holding the can steady while he guided the brush. Art 17 came back slowly, black against silver, not perfect, not new, but clear enough to read from the road. The Porsche was repaired in 3 weeks. The truck never needed to be explained again.